The steel doors of the prison clanged shut behind him, echoing down the long, dimly lit hallways. The lights flickered above, casting uneven shadows across the cracked concrete floor. The smell of disinfectant and sweat mixed in the air. Every footstep seemed louder than it should be. He walked slowly, his hands relaxed by his sides. Nothing about him screamed danger or legendary fighter. His orange jumpsuit was plain, slightly worn. His hair was neatly trimmed, nothing remarkable. Yet something in his posture, calm, steady, unshakable, made even the hardened guards pause for a brief second as he passed. In the common area, the other inmates were already sizing up the new arrival. A group of 3 men, bulky and mean-looking, nudged each other and whispered with smirks. Their eyes followed him like predators. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward, cracking his knuckles with deliberate exaggeration. "Hey," the bully said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You think you belong here?" His tone was mocking, venomous, meant to humiliate. "This place isn't for people like you." He didn't flinch. He didn't even lift an eyebrow. He simply continued walking, his gaze steady, scanning the room without hesitation. The other inmates laughed, a harsh, grating sound that bounced off the steel walls. Some of them even pulled out phones to capture what they thought would be an easy, viral moment. The bully's grin widened. He assumed the silence was feared. "What's the matter?" he sneered. "Tat got your tongue." Still, the man said nothing. He stopped at the middle of the yard, took a slow breath, and simply watched. The silence around him grew heavier. The laughter of the bullies seemed to falter, if only slightly. Prison bullies humiliated a new inmate, not knowing they were about to meet someone who could change everything in an instant. He was calm, controlled, and the kind of man who didn't need to prove himself with words. The camera zoomed in on his eyes. Dark, focused, unwavering. The smallest movement, a shift in his stance, was enough to make the tallest bully hesitate. The man's calmness wasn't weakness. It was power. The tension in the room was palpable. Every laugh had faded. Whispers started spreading among the inmates. A subtle but growing unease filled the space. Everyone watching felt it. Something about this ordinary-looking man was far from ordinary. And yet no one had any idea what was coming next. The new inmate moved deeper into the prison yard, his steps measured, calm. Around him, the prison was alive with tension, a world entirely different from the outside. The sun, weak through high barred windows, barely lit the cracked concrete ground. Every shadow seemed to hide a story, every movement a possible threat. Some inmates were lifting improvised weights, old metal pipes and cement blocks chained together, grunting as they pushed themselves to exhaustion. Others sat in small groups, whispering, playing cards, or trading gossip. A few leaned against the walls, eyes sharp, constantly scanning for weakness. A man with a scar across his cheek watched the new inmate walk past, his gaze sharp, sizing him up. "Fresh meat," he muttered, half to himself. "Let's see how long you last." The guards were few but vigilant. One leaned casually against the railing, arms crossed, watching everything unfold like a hawk. Prison wasn't just about brute strength. It was about understanding who could control fear, and who would crumble under it. The new inmate's plain jumpsuit did nothing to command attention. In fact, it made him invisible at first glance. But invisibility can be dangerous in a place like this. People assumed weakness from appearances. In prisons, judgments are made instantly. People often underestimate those who appear average, which can be a fatal mistake. Across the yard, a group of inmates played a game of handball, shouting and laughing loudly, trying to assert dominance over the space. When someone missed a shot, the laughter was merciless, the teasing sharp. Every interaction had stakes. Every joke could be a challenge or an insult. The new inmate passed a table where a few seasoned prisoners were eating. One of them, noticing the calm demeanor, whispered to his friend, "Who's this guy? He doesn't even flinch." "Yeah," his friend replied. "Most of them start sweating the moment they get here. Something's different about him." The bullies from before were still circling, muttering under their breath, trying to appear confident. They nudged each other, their eyes darting back to the new inmate, looking for signs of fear. The leader of the group cracked his knuckles again. "He thinks he's tough, huh? Let's see him crumble." The new inmate stopped for a moment, glanced around and adjusted his stance. Not aggressive, not defensive, just grounded like a tree with deep roots. His calm presence was almost magnetic. Some inmates instinctively stepped back uncertain, others leaned in curious. Confidence and calm in a hostile environment are often interpreted as hidden strength. It changes the way people perceive you before you ever act. from the second tier. A few inmates leaned over the railings of their cells watching. Even the guards shifted slightly in their stance. They sensed tension rising but didn't know why. Everyone could feel that something was different about this man, but no one could name it yet. The sun shifted slightly, casting long shadows across the yard. The heat made the concrete walls shimmer faintly. A crow cawed outside, a distant reminder of the world beyond. But inside the yard, rules were different. Respect was earned by observation, by strength, and by fearlessness. The leader of the bully group finally spoke aloud, trying to break the silence in. "You're new here, huh? Better hope you don't mess with the wrong people." The new inmate nodded slightly, nothing more. His calm, almost passive acknowledgement only increased the tension. The bullies were used to reactions, fear, anger, begging, but this reaction was unfamiliar. Around them, the prison life continued, hustles, fights, whispered alliances forming and breaking in real time. But all of it paused slightly as the new inmate stood in the middle of the yard. It wasn't a pause of fear, it was a pause of recognition. Something about him suggested he wasn't just another inmate. Even the smallest gestures mattered here. A shrug, a glance, a slow step forward. Each one sent messages louder than words. In this environment, appearances were only the first layer of understanding. What was beneath could either save you or destroy you. By the time he reached the center of the yard, the tension was thick. Eyes were locked on him. Inmates whispered, "Who is he?" The bullies' confidence wavered for the first time. Their smirks faded slightly. Something about the new inmate unsettled them, though they couldn't explain why. The sun dipped further, and shadows stretched across the yard like fingers reaching for every secret. The stage was set. A storm was brewing, but it hadn't started yet. If you were in his shoes, would you confront the bullies or stay silent like him? Comment below. The new inmate had barely reached the center of the yard when the bullies decided to make their move. The tallest one, a muscular man with a crooked jaw and tattooed arms, stepped forward first. His two companions flanked him, forming a triangle meant to intimidate. Every step they took seemed exaggerated, deliberate, as if their presence alone could bend the space around them. The leader cracked his knuckles loudly, making sure every sound echoed through the yard. Some inmates looked over casually, but most were too busy with their own hustles. The bullies relied on intimidation to set the tone. They knew the yard, and knew the hierarchy, and new inmates were always an easy target. "Hey you!" the leader called out, his voice rough and sarcastic. "You lost or something?" The new inmate looked at him slowly, unblinking. He didn't flinch. His gaze was calm, measured, almost serene. That was the first thing the bullies noticed. He didn't react like the others. He didn't shrink. He didn't flinch. Bullies feed on fear. Silence or calmness can be more threatening than anger because it's unpredictable. The tallest bully stepped closer, towering over the new inmate. He pointed at his worn shoes and cheap jumpsuit. "Look at these shoes. Look at you. You think you belong here? You think you can walk into this yard like you own it?" His voice carried over the yard. A few inmates paused, sensing the tension. Others turned their heads, curious. The words weren't just insults, they were challenges. The new inmate said nothing. He shifted his weight slightly, standing firmly, but still relaxed. That lack of reaction made the bullies angrier. Anger, after all, was what fueled their sense of power. When it didn't work, they had to escalate. The leader's grin widened, showing chipped teeth. He leaned in closer, his nose almost brushing the new inmate's face. "Maybe you think I'm joking. Maybe you think I'm scared of you. Guess what? You're not in charge here, and we'll make sure everyone knows it." One of the flanking bullies, shorter but wary and fast, stepped forward. He jabbed his shoulder lightly into the new inmate's chest, testing his reaction. "Yeah," he sneered, "you're gonna learn real quick. This is our yard, our rules, and newcomers like you, well, you either play along or you get broken." The new inmate's calmness didn't change. He didn't step back. He didn't retaliate. He only tilted his head slightly, observing them carefully, almost like a cat watching a mouse. The subtle shift in posture was enough to unsettle the bullies just a little. They expected fear or aggression, not quiet confidence. In confrontations, people often misread calm for weakness, but calm can be the most intimidating response because it signals control. The leader snorted, clearly irritated by the lack of a reaction. He decided to escalate, raising his voice now, making sure the insult was public. "Everyone see this guy. Thinks he can just stroll in here. Look at him. He doesn't even know how things work. He's weak. Pathetic." A few inmates chuckled at the display, encouraging the bullies. Others watched silently, sensing something unusual about the new inmate. Even some of the hardened veterans shifted uneasily. The new inmate shifted again, folding his arms slowly. His movement was deliberate, controlled, but not aggressive. Every muscle seemed relaxed, yet ready. The bullies noticed it, a silent tension that made the air around him feel heavier. The shortest bully, desperate to assert himself, pushed the new inmate lightly on the shoulder. "You think you're special? Huh? You think you're better than us?" The new inmate didn't react. He took a slow step forward, closing the tiny gap without touching anyone. The movement was so controlled, so deliberate, that it made the bullies hesitate. They weren't used to hesitation. They weren't used to silence. They were used to fear. And this silence was disarming. A few inmates whispered to each other, "Who is this guy?" "I don't know, but he's not scared." The leader's face darkened. He was losing control of the situation, and that wasn't acceptable. Power in the yard was built on intimidation, not reasoning. Losing control was dangerous. He leaned closer again, voice low, venomous. "Listen. You better start acting like you belong here, or we'll make sure your first night in prison is your last without peace." The new inmate finally made a small gesture, almost imperceptible. He tilted his head, eyes locking on the leaders. Not a challenge, not a threat, just calm, unwavering attention. Body language is everything in tense situations. The slightest shift can communicate confidence, dominance, or readiness, and in prisons, it's often louder than words. The yard fell silent. Even the clanging of distant metal sounded distant now. The bullies' smirks faltered slightly. The smallest doubt crept in. Maybe this one wasn't like the others. The leader clenched his fists, jaw tight. The flanking bullies exchanged nervous glances. For the first time, the bullies weren't sure of what would happen next. Their usual tactics, mockery, intimidation, pushing boundaries, weren't having the effect they expected. Time stretch. Every second felt heavier than the last. The other inmates noticed. Whispers rippled across the yard. Some stepped back instinctively, sensing that the calm man in front of the bullies was different, special, and yet no one had any idea just how different. The stage was set. The bullies had made their move. They had humiliated him, or at least tried to. But what was coming next, the inmates had no clue. The bullies expected a reaction. Anger, fear, even flinching, anything that would make him vulnerable. But the new inmate stood still, his posture relaxed, his shoulders loose, and yet every movement radiated quiet authority. He didn't tighten his fists. He didn't raise his voice. He simply observed. The tallest bully stepped closer, invading his space, trying to break his composure. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" He sneered, poking his chest. Still no response. Instead, the new inmate shifted his weight slightly, evenly distributing it between both feet. Not in retreat, not in aggression. Just presence. A simple gesture, but in the yard, it spoke louder than any words. The bully hesitated. He wasn't used to this. Normally, he could intimidate anyone within seconds. Silence in a hostile environment is not empty. It's a signal. It communicates confidence and control without revealing intentions. Most people are unsettled by silence because they expect a reaction, and when they don't get it, their mind starts filling in the blanks. That uncertainty creates fear. The two other bullies glanced at each other nervously. Even the background chatter of the yard had quieted slightly, replaced by an almost tangible tension. Other inmates paused mid-action, sensing that this wasn't just another confrontation. The new inmate slowly folded his arms, not tightly, just naturally, and leaned back a fraction of an inch. His eyes scanned the leader of the bullies, then the others, then the surrounding yard. Nothing in his gaze was hostile. Nothing in his posture was threatening, yet every fiber of his being radiated unshakable strength. One of the flanking bullies, the wary one, tried to make a move. He stepped forward, fist raised slightly, thinking intimidation would force a reaction. The new inmate shifted his weight subtly. Not fast, not threatening, just a small, controlled movement. That single gesture was enough to make the wary bully pause mid-step. His confidence faltered, replaced by an instinctive hesitation he couldn't explain. When someone doesn't react to provocation, especially someone calm in a threatening environment, it disrupts the bully's mental framework. They rely on predictable fear responses. Unpredictable calm makes them doubt their own power. The leader tried to regain control. He laughed loudly, forcing the yard to hear him.
"Hey, we're talking to you?"
Still nothing. Then the new inmate took a slow, deliberate breath. His chest rose and fell evenly, rhythm steady, like a silent drum marking control of the space around him. The yard seemed to contract, every sound muffled in contrast to the intensity radiating from his calm. Some inmates whispered, almost reverently, "Who is he? Why isn't he scared? This guy, he's not like anyone I've seen here before." The leader's frustration grew. He jabbed his shoulder lightly again, testing him. The new inmate didn't flinch. He didn't even step back. He simply shifted slightly, just enough to absorb the force without reacting. The bully stumbled ever so slightly, surprised. The smallest gestures mattered. A tilt of the head, a steady gaze, a slow exhale, every detail communicated, "I see you. I am aware, I am calm." The two flanking bullies exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time, they weren't sure who was in control. The usual tactics, mockery, intimidation, physical pushes had failed. This wasn't weakness. This was strength. A quiet, invisible power that unsettled everyone who tried to dominate him. Even the guards took notice. They hadn't interfered yet, but now they leaned slightly forward, watching closely. Something about the new inmate was different. Not dangerous in the way they feared, but dangerous in a way they couldn't measure. The new inmate shifted again, slightly to the left, arms still folded, breathing even. His eyes met the leader's, not with anger, not with challenge. Just calm, unwavering observation. The leader's jaw tightened. He realized he had no emotional hold here. His usual tricks, his usual bravado had no effect. Calmness is one of the most underrated forms of power. When someone remains unshaken, the aggressor begins to doubt themselves before any action is taken. It's an invisible dominance that can be more terrifying than any physical threat. The yard was silent now. Even the laughing, joking inmates had stopped. Phones hovered mid-recording. Time seemed to stretch as everyone felt the subtle tension, the quiet force of a man who didn't need to prove himself. Finally, the leader took a step back, trying to reclaim his composure. The wary flanking bully fidgeted, looking for any sign of weakness. But there was none. The new inmate was still, calm, controlled, commanding the attention of everyone without a single word. Some inmates muttered, shaking their heads. "This guy, he's not afraid of anything. Maybe he's someone important." The subtle fear in the bully's eyes was unmistakable. They had come to humiliate a newcomer, expecting an easy display of power. Instead, they were being humiliated by silence. Not by force, not by words, but by sheer presence. The calm was suffocating, almost electric. Every heartbeat in the yard seemed louder. Every glance at the new inmate carried a mixture of awe, fear, and confusion. The bullies could feel it. They were losing, even without a single punch being thrown. And in that moment, the entire yard, the guards, the watching inmates, even the bullies themselves, sensed the truth. This man was no ordinary inmate. He was someone far beyond their comprehension, a force that required no violence to command respect. The tension stretched further. The bullies' confidence had crumbled, replaced by unease. Every move they made now was cautious. Every word carefully measured. They had underestimated him, and for the first time, they understood that underestimating him could be a dangerous mistake. The yard had fallen into a quiet, heavy stillness. Even the distant clang of metal doors sounded muted. Inmates who had been loudly joking or lifting weights now paused mid-motion. Every eye, every subtle movement, was drawn to the new inmate standing calmly in the center. A whisper ran through the crowd. "Who is this guy? He doesn't even sweat. Something about him feels wrong. Dangerous wrong." Some inmates shifted backward instinctively, as if stepping closer to him would somehow invite trouble. The leader of the bullies noticed this hesitation and felt a brief flicker of uncertainty, one he quickly tried to cover with arrogance. "Don't just stare," he barked. "Say something, do something." The new inmate didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't speak. His presence alone seemed to stretch the space around him. The air felt heavier, as if even gravity had acknowledged his calm authority. Humans are wired to respond to confidence. In high-stakes environments like a prison, calm, unshakable presence can make even aggressive individuals pause and reconsider their actions. A few of the other inmates had stopped their handball game entirely, leaning against walls, their attention fixed. Their whispers grew louder. "I've been here for 5 years. Never seen someone so still. Even the guards are watching him." The guards indeed were. One leaned slightly over the railing, eyes sharp. Another adjusted his stance, hands hovering near his belt. None had intervened yet, but instinctively, they recognized the tension. Something was about to happen, but no one knew exactly what. The bullies, sensing the shift, tried to regain dominance. One jabbed the air near the new inmate's chest, hoping for a reaction. He expected a flinch, a scowl, anything to feed on. But the new inmate's gaze remained steady, unyielding. The bullies exchanged uncertain glances. The tallest bully cleared his throat, lowering his voice, trying to sound intimidating but betraying a hint of doubt. You think you're better than us?" Still silence. The crowd of inmates, previously passive, began to lean in subtly. Eyes widened as whispers spread like wildfire. "Is not reacting at all. He's calm, too calm." Even the smallest gestures were amplified. A slow blink, a subtle shift of weight, a glance sideways. Everything the new inmate did seemed deliberate, controlled, magnetic. One younger inmate muttered to his friend, "Man, if he wanted to, he could take all of them down without breaking a sweat." The leader of the bullies began to sweat, though he tried to hide it with a forced laugh. He jabbed the new inmate again, this time more forcefully, as if physical intimidation could force a reaction. The new inmate shifted slightly, a move so subtle it was almost imperceptible, but it was enough to absorb the impact and remain perfectly balanced. The bully stumbled, just for a fraction of a second, and the subtle crack in his confidence didn't go unnoticed by the others. Other inmates started whispering more openly now. Some leaned forward to get a better look. Phones emerged from pockets. Some recorded the confrontation, sensing something extraordinary unfolding in real time. The calmness of the new inmate had created a ripple effect. The yard itself seemed to respond. Laughter had vanished. Movement had slowed. Even the guards were tense, unsure if and when to intervene. One inmate, an older man with a scar across his cheek, shook his head slowly and muttered, This guy isn't ordinary. Mark my words." The flanking bullies, previously smug, now shifted nervously. Every small twitch of the new inmate's shoulders, every slow blink, felt like a test they were failing. Confidence drained from their eyes, replaced by unease and subtle fear. A guard finally cleared his throat, breaking the tense silence for a brief moment, but the eyes of everyone were still locked on the new inmate. No one spoke, no one moved, except for the subtle, deliberate presence of the calm man in the center. Even the leader's smirk faltered. He had relied on aggression, noise, mockery, but nothing had worked. The quiet intensity of this new inmate was reshaping the power dynamics of the yard. For the first time, the bullies weren't in control. The whispers grew louder, reaching even the farthest corners of the yard. Who is he? Never seen anyone like him. He doesn't even react, he just watches. Time seemed to stretch. Seconds felt like minutes. The bullies were trapped in their own expectations, unsure how to proceed. Every inch of the yard was aware of the silent power standing before them. Then a subtle nod. Just a small movement. The new inmate adjusted his stance, his calm unbroken, yet somehow commanding the attention of everyone, even the toughest prisoners. The tension reached a near unbearable peak. Every witness in the yard now understood one thing: the game had changed. The bullies, the guards, the watching inmates. No one could predict what would happen next, and in that pregnant pause, every eye was drawn to him, waiting, anticipating, knowing that when he finally moved, it would be decisive. What would you do if you saw someone stay completely calm while being provoked by bullies? Comment your reaction. The air in the prison yard was thick, almost suffocating. Every inmate, every guard, every pair of eyes was locked on the new arrival. The bullies had lost their confidence. Their smirks were gone, replaced by unease. The leader's jaw clenched, sweat glistening on his forehead. The wiry flanking bully's fingers twitched nervously. For the first time, they didn't know what to do. The new inmate shifted his stance, calm and deliberate, and finally moved. Not aggressively, not with force, but with a smooth, controlled motion that rippled through the yard like a shockwave. The leader stepped forward instinctively, trying to reclaim dominance. "You," he began, but his voice faltered as the new inmate's eyes met his. It wasn't just a gaze. It was calm, measured, unflinching, a presence that instantly made him aware of every weakness, every misstep, every overconfidence. The bully froze mid-step. When someone radiates complete control, the human brain perceives it as superior strength. Even aggressive individuals instinctively recognize dominance before any words or violence occur. The smallest flinch from the leader was all it took. In one fluid motion, the new inmate moved, not to strike, but to subtly redirect the leader's energy. The leader staggered slightly off balance. Gasps echoed through the yard. Phones dropped slightly as inmates leaned forward. Whispers erupted. Did he just? He's unbelievable. The flanking bully stepped closer, trying to assert control, but the new inmate sidestepped him with effortless precision. No harsh movements, no aggression, just subtle shifts that made it clear he was in control of the space. The leader's eyes widened. "Who are you?" he stammered, voice barely audible. The calm man smiled faintly. "You really want to know?" His voice was even low, commanding. Before anyone could react further, he took a deliberate step back, motioning slightly with his hands. A fluid, controlled movement, almost a demonstration of mastery. The subtlety was striking. The yard froze. Every guard leaned forward instinctively. Every inmate instinctively measured distance, unsure what would happen next. Then the words came, soft but unmistakable. "I am Steven Seagal." A beat of silence, heavy and electric. The name carried weight, history, and unspoken authority. The bullies froze, eyes wide. Recognition hit them like a punch to the chest. Their confidence evaporated instantly. Their mouths opened, but no words came. "Seagal." The leader whispered, disbelief in every syllable. The wary bully staggered backward, his bravado shattered. Even the previously confident leader stumbled slightly, as if reality itself had shifted beneath his feet. Inmates erupted with murmurs and whispers. Phones recorded the moment, some trembling slightly in the hands of those holding them. "No way. It can't be. That's Steven Seagal." Even the guards exchanged glances. One of them, a veteran with decades of prison experience, muttered quietly, "I've never seen someone handle a yard like that without a single punch." Steven didn't raise his voice. He didn't yell. He didn't even make a threat. He simply stood, calm and controlled, letting the recognition settle in the yard. His presence alone conveyed authority and respect. The leader of the bullies tried to recover, but his movements were cautious, hesitant. Every instinct screamed this man was not ordinary. He was someone to be reckoned with. The flanking bully muttered under his breath, nearly inaudible, we shouldn't have tried that." Steven took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance subtly, not to intimidate, but to assert presence. Every eye in the yard followed him. He glanced at the leader, then the flanking bully, then swept the yard with a slow, precise look. "Judging others by appearance," he said quietly, almost conversationally, "is the weakest form of arrogance." The bullies swallowed hard. Their heads lowered, shame, fear, and awe blended in their expressions. They realized that humiliation they had tried to deliver had backfired entirely. They were the ones exposed, powerless before someone who didn't need to fight to command respect. Inmates leaned closer, some whispering to each other, "He doesn't even have to strike. Just his presence." Even the guards recognized the lesson being silently taught. True authority doesn't scream, it simply is. Steven finally moved toward a bench, sitting slowly, folding his hands over his knees, his calm still radiating. The tension in the yard didn't disappear, it transformed. Respect had replaced fear, awe had replaced aggression, and the lesson was unmistakable. Power is measured by control, not chaos. The bullies didn't retreat. They didn't run. They simply lowered their heads, understanding that trying to assert dominance had been a mistake they would remember for a long time. And as the yard slowly returned to routine, whispers continued, "That was Seagal. I thought he was just another inmate. You don't mess with someone like him." The moment had passed, but its impact lingered. Every witness, guard and inmate alike, understood something fundamental. Judgment based on appearances is dangerous. Calm strength is unmatched. And some lessons don't require violence to be unforgettable. The yard had returned to a slow rhythm, but the atmosphere had changed. The whispers of awe and disbelief lingered. Inmates shifted uneasily, glancing at the new inmate who now sat calmly on the bench, his posture relaxed but commanding. Even the guards seemed to carry a new respect in their stance. The tension in their shoulders slightly eased but still alert. The leader of the bullies, previously brimming with arrogance, stood frozen a few steps away. His jaw tightened. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to assert something, anything, but the presence of the calm, controlled figure before him held him in check. His pride battled with the sudden humility that had replaced his overconfidence. Steven leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, and spoke quietly, deliberately, each word measured. "You judge me by my clothes, by the way I walked, by what you thought I could or could not do. That tells me everything about you, nothing about me." The bullies flinched. The leader opened his mouth, then closed it. The wary flanking bully shifted his weight nervously, realizing the lesson was not in confrontation, it was in perception. Intense environments, lessons delivered calmly and without aggression often stick longer than lessons delivered through punishment or force. It allows the other person to reflect instead of react. A few inmates leaned in slightly curious. Even those who had been uninvolved sensed the moral weight in the words. Respect wasn't given here, it was earned, and in that moment, the lesson became universal. The leader of the bullies finally spoke, his voice low, almost hesitant. I didn't realize. Steven raised a hand, not to stop him, but in a gesture that invited reflection rather than confrontation. It's not about realizing, he said softly. It's about understanding. You have a choice. Let arrogance define you, or let it teach you humility. The yard was silent. The air itself seemed to listen. Every inmate, every guard, every pair of eyes had absorbed the weight of the message, without a single act of violence. Even the clanging doors and distant shouts faded into background noise as the lesson settled. Steven stood slowly, folding his arms calmly. His gaze swept the yard. Not threatening, not aggressive, but commanding attention. He moved toward the bullies, deliberately slow, controlled, radiating authority without force. The leader lowered his head further, nodding slightly. The wary bully followed suit. Their defiance had melted not through fear of harm, but through recognition of true strength and calm authority. Other inmates whispered among themselves, "See, he didn't even have to strike." Respect isn't taken here. It's given when it's earned. Steven walked back to the bench and sat, taking a slow breath. The yard felt lighter, yet charged with a new understanding. Lessons had been delivered, but not through power or rage. They were delivered through control, calm, and integrity. He looked at the bullies again, not with anger, not with condescension, but with quiet expectation. "Today you have a choice," he said. "You can continue letting arrogance and judgment dictate your actions, or you can learn from it. Respect others. Recognize strength without needing to challenge it. That is the path forward." The leader's hands clenched, then relaxed. He nodded slowly, processing the weight of the words. The wary bully's eyes dropped to the ground, shame and reflection mingling. A few inmates took note of the subtle dynamic. Even those who were neutral before had seen something profound. Power is not about intimidation, violence, or loud words. It is about presence, control, and the ability to influence others without raising your voice. The guards exchanged glances. One whispered quietly to another, "That was remarkable." He didn't do anything, but he changed everything. Steven stood once more, looking around. His presence alone carried a silent reminder. Judging someone by appearance or underestimating them is a dangerous mistake. His calm authority had reshaped the yard without a single strike, a single shout, a single unnecessary action. The bullies stepped back, understanding the message fully. Humiliation had been reversed, but not through revenge. It had been reversed through perspective, control, and quiet power. Respect had been earned, and arrogance had been humbled. The yard began to return to its routines, but the memory of what had just occurred lingered in every mind. Even the whispers carried a sense of inspiration, a lesson that would ripple through the prison long after the new inmate walked away from the bench. Steven finally stood, adjusted his jumpsuit, and walked toward the exit. Each step deliberate, calm, and unwavering. Every inmate watched, the lesson etched into their minds. No words could replace the understanding that had been delivered through presence alone. And as he disappeared from view, the moral was clear. True power doesn't need to prove itself through violence. Judging others is the weakest form of arrogance, and respect can be earned without force, only through control, humility, and integrity. If you were in their place, would you take the lesson or ignore it? Comment what you would do.